Hello everyone. Good evening. So welcome back to Local Techies. So this time I would like to share my experience with my previous interview, which I have cleared recently. So coming to the interview panel, so there are only one person has joined from the employer, and so the duration for the interview it was scheduled for 30 minutes, but it takes just extended 10 more minutes, like it happened around 40 minutes of time. So and there are back to back three interviews was done for me, and so there are couple of questions which are common in three interviews, and all the interviews were taken by the client directly for me. So there is no interview was taken by the payroll company. And coming to the questions part, like they ask roles and responsibilities, and then they most of the time like they concentrated on the Azure and Terraform, and some of the ADO stuff with the use cases on the ADO side, and along with the DevOps tool stacks things. Okay. I can say it's not that difficult, but at the same time, like they ask me like some scenario based questions, which mostly I had worked in my career. Okay, so let's begin the interview then. So how it is? Let's begin the actual session then. And the first question for me is they ask me, so they want me to introduce myself. So with all the roles and responsibilities and my experience in my career, and with the tool stacks and all, and also the daily regular activities that I am currently doing in my current project. So here, so I started like this is Raghunath. I am working as a DevOps consultant, and I totally have around 9 years of experience into IT, and have most of the time work experience as DevOps and cloud expertise. I have completed my graduation in 2012, and later my post graduation in 2015, and later I started working as an application support engineer in one of the financial client. There I started working with build and release activities. It's kind of a CI/CD automations and CI/CD build and release activities over there. So that is how, like, that is a platform where I started working on. And later I became a build and release engineer. So there I started working on the CI/CD automations tools, and some of the remote repository organizations. I can say it's kind of a JFrog Artifactory and deployment onto the server, like application servers like Tomcat, and web servers like IIS Manager on the Windows platforms. And then I changed my domain to DevOps and Cloud DevOps engineering. So it's same client. I got the chance to work as the DevOps engineer and Cloud DevOps tool stacks. So there I started working with other DevOps tool stacks like GitHub, and branching strategies and policies, and implementation of the release management at the client side for better releases and better deliverables and all. And also it's my job there, work as an administrator on the CI/CD, that including of regular development part, creation of the pipelines and all. That also include like administration, like managing of the nodes, managing of the security, managing of the users and permissions, and slaves and master and slave configurations for the CI/CD tool. So it's totally I have experience on both Jenkins and ADO. So but most of the time I was working on the ADO side. And coming to the cloud stack, so I have experience into Azure most of the time, where I used to work with Azure different services like IaaS, PaaS, and the SaaS services. That including of the development level, and also administration on some of the services, that including of managing of the role-based access control and security controls for the services that we deployed through the CI/CD pipelines. And I also have experience into AWS sometime, like where I used to work with the infrastructure services, mostly EC2 and the networking services, and also one migration service, that is Cloud Ender, as a server migration service. And coming to the platform side, I have experience in both standalone applications and I can say like microservices and monolithic applications. So that gave me chance to work with the containerized platforms by using the Docker. And as part of the multi-cluster configuration thing, so I got to chance to work with the Kubernetes cluster management. So working with the pods, manifest files, and deployments and stateful sets, and involving into the other aspects like networking things like ingress and security and config maps and everything. So these are all the services that I had worked as part of the DevOps tool stack. And coming to the monitoring purpose, like I have experience into Azure monitoring for the infrastructure management and the monitoring purpose. Whereas for the application flow, I have experience with the Grafana as an application data flow. So, and sometime like I was involved in migration activities that including of the DevOps tool stack migrations and also the cloud migration from on-premises to cloud platforms. And the second question that I got is, what is your role in ADO? What is your role in ADO? So in ADO, I'm mostly working as an a development purpose in the ADO that mainly for CI/CD automation flows, creation of the build and release pipelines, and also I have experience as an administrator on the ADO that gave me chance to work on administration activities like managing of the pools, managing of the users, managing of the permissions, managing the agent pools, and also the main thing is the extensions and on the migration part. So it's kind of a migration. I was involved in the ADO from one server to another server, and also uh, it's kind of an extension management thing. So I was kind of a product owner for the ADO, so it's my responsibility to add extensions to the ADO and dealing with the vendor and get signed for all the to overcome all the security concerns that we have or that we are hosting on our ADO server, and also managing of the licenses, especially the subscriptions and enterprise licenses for we have which comes along with our ADO licenses. So I can say as part of the regular development, so it's my job to managing these licenses on the ADO, that with an additional benefits like parallel jobs and controlling the parallel jobs on the each nodes and setting up additional nodes whenever we need, and also setting up so simply I can say like it's kind of an identifying the scope for the better improvements on the ADO wherever we can apply. For example, we have some self-hosted agents that have multiple custom softwares are there. So there we have started using the VM skill set with a minimum number of nodes and maximum number of capacity. But even though it is a costlier because of the project requirement and the project's performance issues and all, so we want the high availability agents should be available for that particular project. So we spinned up the VM skill set for that use. These are all the things that I'm taking care on the ADO along with our build and release pipeline activities and all. So coming to the Terraform lifecycle, so there are two categories I can say on the Terraform lifecycle. So in generally, the lifecycle is mainly having the four stages like creation of the resources, creation of the infra, and reading the infra, and update the infra and delete. It means like first of all we need to create the infrastructure, and so that is one scenario where we running the Terraform init and a Terraform validate and Terraform plan and the Terraform apply. So that's going to applying the changes and creating the resources for the Azure cloud or in a cloud. Once that is there, the next phase of the life Terraform life cycle is reading. So for example, you have some infrastructure already available. Now it's our job to make new updates over that. So in order to apply those changes, so we need to read the current state of the resources. So that is what the read is I mean. So the read is going to be reading the existing infrastructure state and identifying the gaps with respect to our configuration files and updating those modifications and updating the resources according to our configuration files. And coming to the next phase is update, where actually the update is going to be happening. So if at all any additional changes are needed, that something needs to be updated on the existing resources, then the update is going to be taken. And we have the delete. So delete is kind of a deletion of the resources that falls under the fourth phase. So along these, so in the level, so we have one or two more stages, like create before destroy. So when we creating the when we destroying the resources, we want them to create. And another one is like we can also control, like if someone trying to make the destroy, so someone is deleting the things on the Azure cloud, so we can prevent them, so by running prevent destroy. And so sometimes like we don't want other people to make the changes on the Azure resources from the portal, so then I can go with the ignore changes. So uh, there are like these kind of lifecycle blocks can also be implemented along with our standard lifecycle stages like create, read, update, and delete. And coming to the actual execution part, so we do have like four stages I can say here also. One is the Terraform init, so which is actually initializing the Terraform modules and Terraform plugins which are required. All the Terraform configurations that we defined in our configuration files. So that's going to be executed with the Terraform init command, and then we have the Terraform validate. So Terraform validate is the command like which will validating the syntax and as- the structure of the our Terraform configuration files with the proper alignment and syntax and all. And in between we can also run the Terraform format command, which will look into the code format of the Terraform as per the standards of the Terraform. It will make change. And the next one is Terraform valid apply, Terraform plan. So the Terraform plan is going to be referencing our configurations with respect to the actual state of the resources that we already provisioned or that we are targeting to apply the changes. So that makes a comparison and gives you a visualization on so what are all the actions are expected to done with these configuration files. So this is going to be shown by Terraform plan command, and once that is done, so Terraform apply is the one actually execution is going to be happening. So that's going to applying the changes, so whatever that we defined in our configuration file to the resources in the Azure cloud. So this is how like we can go with the Terraform life cycle. And the last question is how to avoid the Terraform state file missing and use that with the best standard. Like it's a kind of a scenario based question they ask me. Like they have a scenario of deleting the state file from the remote locations. It may be from the remote or it may be from his local workspace. The state file got deleted, and how we going to retrieve that in order to execute the next updates on the Terraform resource with the help of the Terraform commands to update the resources on the Azure cloud. So here we have different scenarios like so the first thing is I will investigate where the state file is available. Actually, is it already pointed to or stored in the remote repositories, or it is pointed to in a stored locations like Azure storage accounts and all. If it is available in the Azure storage, so I will look into the containers and find the Terraform state file and get that copy into my local workspace from where I'm executing our Terraform configuration file, so that I can get the latest Terraform state that I have that we already there in the containers. So this is one way. And if that is not available, let's assume so uh, obviously in our local workspace we do have the Terraform backup file. So for every state file we have a Terraform state dot backup file, so that is also kind of a backup of our Terraform state. So that just rename it to Terraform dot state, so that could also works for us, which can replace, which can be used for the instead of the Terraform state. But this is the second approach, because at the same time, like if someone made the changes on the remote Terraform state, so that is going to be the updated one. So the first method should be getting the updated one which is available in the storage accounts or containers. And another one is like rebuilding that state file. So we have some resources already provisioned. Unfortunately, we lost the state file in our local now. So we have a clear picture of state. So what is the state of the current resources in the issue? So that state can be imported to our local with the help of the Terraform import command. So Terraform import is going to be get the state of the resources that we are already running in the Azure cloud. So here we need to give the resource ID, and this is one way. And also sometime like when we have some issues with the Terraform state or mismatching or not getting updated, then also we can go and use the Terraform get update, so which will force your local Terraform state file to latest changes that we have in the Azure cloud with respect to the resource ID. Yeah. So, what are all the resources you have experience in Azure? So, I have experience in working with multiple resources like infrastructure as a services and PaaS services and SaaS services also. But most of the time, I was working with VMs and virtual machines and VM scale set and app services, especially web apps and Azure functions and Azure Logic apps, and data services ADF. And I have involved in the ADF pipelines creations and also publishing them into the different environment through the CI/CD automation flows. And also as part of like a regular spinning up of these resources on the cloud, right? So I used to work with the vnets and subnets and security groups, which is kind of a activity when we spinning up any kind of resources for the Azure. So so along these, so we storing our secrets and all in two locations. One is variable groups. Sometimes like variable groups should also be integrated with the Azure Key Vaults, which having additionally a rotational policy of secrets management, expiry dates and all. And also have experience in the storage accounts. So because of storage accounts, like where we have used that storage account for Azure functions and logic app creations, because they need the storage accounts file the file systems to have the file servers for their app services and all. So mostly these are the services I have experience in Azure. And also I have experience in controlling the access control, especially RBAC, rollback access control with the IAM policies and all. Yeah, so as part of the Azure landing zone experience, like we have one set of Azure landing zone where we have a set of environment has already been recommended to go and deploying any services. For example, we have the firewall system and we have the bastion and replacement of the bastion with the virtual appliances to reduce the cost. And so for every network, like we prefer to go with the hub and spoke model, so that there will be only one point of contact for incoming and outgoing traffic. And also it can give a one point of contact, and all the time like we can control the security groups to that particular spoke network and all. So what is meant by service connection and service principle? So basically what I can say, service principle is kind of an identity that will be used by an application or resources in the Azure cloud. So that's being used and to interact with the other services with a access control at defined scope. So I can say simply service principle is kind of an identity as similar to the user, but it is mainly being used by the applications or services in the Azure. Whereas service connection is kind of a access control or access mm, uh, that's been set up by a service principal. So in order to access external resources from the Azure side, can we deploy the resources in different regions or different providers at the same time, and how? Yes, so this is possible in different ways. So if we have a requirement of going ahead with the multiple providers, yes, you can define the provided details in the in the Terraform configuration files. And if you're looking at so creation of resources with the alias, you can give the desired the required details, required region or required provided information in the blocks and define them with the alias and just calling those blocks with the alias names in our configurations. That could be possible. Explain the branching strategy that you following. Yeah, so I have multiple branching strategies we have in our current project, but all the time, I prefer to go with a branching strategy that is having three branches. One is for the development branch, so where we expect to commit the changes from the development with all the latest changes that's expected to release into the dev environment. And every branch commit is expected to have a peer review, so that should be automated and that should be reviewed by minimum number of reviewers and approvals with a valid comment. And once that is done, so dev branch code is expected to match with the test branch or release branch. So here it is a responsible releasing the code or in the build and deploying the artifacts to the lower environment till pre-prod or I can say till QA environment. So once that is done, so the release branch is also responsible to deploy them into the production environment. So once the production deployment is done, and once the production environment looks good, and after having a duration of certain time period, so that's defined by the team. So we merging this release branch code to the master branch or main branch, so that all the time the main branch will be available and updated with the stable code only. Unfortunately, if something is wrong and that was not successful on the production deployment from the release to prod, and if there is some issue identified in the production, so immediately the stable code which is already there in the main branch can be rolled back to a production environment. You have one issue found that was already fixed by the engineering team. How you will be ready for the same issue in the next time? So if we are so it means I feel like this is kind of a SRE role. So if we are under the SRE role and the issue was been fixed by the development team, so I feel we need to sit or we need to coordinate with the development team and identifying the issues first time when it is happened, and noting down all the possible reasons and the the solution details, and making uh, that in the documentation, and keep available that I mean placing the document available for all our team members. And next time when it happens, referring to the same documentation and fixing the issue at a first level. Yeah, so this is what I feel like a better approach. But before going to the development team, so if it is kind of some pre-analysis information we need to do, that we should be ready for that. How to control the access to Azure resources? So we can control the access to Azure resources in different ways. Like we can control at the subscription level role-based access control, or with the so simply the first level will be RBAC. So rollback access control for each resource, that including of different permissions and set of permissions we have. And sometimes we are allowed to have only vnet level access and subnet level access, so that is going to be controlled with the security group with the inbound and outbound rules, that including of ports enablement and specific priority number also. And also we can implement some kind of bastion, so that resources will not be accessible from outside, so it is totally accessible only inside the cloud network. So there are these three ways that we can do. What are the pipelines are you capable of in ADO, and explain how to write? Yeah, so I have experience in working with both classic and AML pipelines, especially on AML, so where I'm writing the pipelines from scratch, that including of different stages like CA, that including of the pre-installation softwares, making the build and publishing them into the artifacts and downloading them into the I can say the pipeline artifacts and all. So and later just using them into the CD stage, the downloading and publishing them into the different environment. So here I have the scenario of the creation of the resources, and which is a part of the CD pipeline, and also CI is including of checking out of the code and making the build and publishing the artifacts to the Azure artifacts. And the CD stage comes with the resource group creations and the creation of the resources and configuring the resources and deploying, downloading of the artifacts from the Azure artifacts, and then publishing the artifacts to Azure resources. And here, like I have work experience with the different services like Azure Functions and Logic App and Web App Services, and also AKS Cluster and ADF Service. So these are all like am capable of writing and doing from end to end. So coming to the the format, like I prefer to go with the triggers first. So where we controlling like which branch commits are expected to trigger this pipeline, and then we have the parameters. So with respect to the when we have parameterized pipelines, right? So we need to use the variables and variable groups. So we need to choose those variable groups on the parameters we defined in the pipeline. So I define the parameters and keeping the variables, standards variables, and keeping the different stages like CA and CD separately, and with the different jobs, and that comes with the steps, that comes with the tasks. So what is VNet and subnet and security group? So a VNet is like a private network inside the Azure, so where your virtual machines, databases, and services can communicate securely. So which is kind of a isolated from the a common or public cloud. Whereas subnet is kind of a smaller division, which is inside a VNet, that to organize the resources very effectively within the VNet. So, for example, we have the scenario of like having multiple types. So we have three tier applications: front end and front end and middleware and back end. So we needs to implement different security policies for different services, even though these are all comes for and targeting to complete one object, right? So we need to have their own security policies and all. So for that case, like we keeping them in a different subnets and controlling the access or policies and controlling the security to each and every subnet and resources with a network security group, where we have a firewall and a traffic controls and rules are being implemented. Have you worked with the hub and spoke, and how you can control configure it? So I can say so. Hub and spoke network is kind of a high standard network security at our environment level. So that comes with one point of contact for traffic, identifying the incoming traffic and forwarding that to a particular subnet. So which will be act as a spoke. So the incoming traffic will be taken by hub, and defining rules, it will transfer the uh, uh, traffic to associated subnet in the environment. How to explain the situation of losing the state file as part of the Terraform executions? So if it is a case like when we have some unsecured places or unsecured way of doing unstandard, I mean uh, when we are deviating from the standard policies of executions, like we keeping the state file in the storage accounts. So I prefer to go with the storage account, and where we keeping storage containers. So that's kind of a way we can keep our state file as secure, and it's all the time like it is required to log the resources at the Azure level, so that with a different log system, like we can have delete and read. So I prefer to go with the delete, so that people can write the changes to the state file but they cannot delete the state file. Can you list few challenges that you had in your career and how you respond to them? Yeah. So I have some issues like currently in the current project, like we are working with the ADF pipelines, like where we have number of links templates. So I think so in the issue. So when we deploying the link templates or the override parameters, we have a limitation of certain number, but those link templates should not be in our case, like those are there are multiple link templates which are exceeding than that of the recommended value from the issue. So here we have added an additional script to update these link services and calling them on demand wherever we actually performing them in the ADF pipelines. And one more thing is, when we working with the Azure app services, especially Logic App and Function App, so we have a scenario of so the resources are already been provisioned. Now it's our job, like we need to deploy the resources. When we adding the task like deployment, so we have a scenario of there are different ways, like what type of deployment we expected to use when we choosing the logic app deployment. So that is one thing, like I mean incompatible for the existing resources, which we actually identified when we went for the deployment. So we did not realize that before itself, like that is one place like we have no clue. There we realize like the resource which provision that is configured with a deployment model of source, but what we are deploying through the pipeline is kind of a zip method, so that is not working. So that is one thing like we made in the change in the configuration of the logic app. And one more thing is, we have some of the classic data pipelines which are already been provisioned and which are already been created, and that comes with the CA and the CD. So separately we have the pipelines, build pipeline, release pipeline. But there are multiple tasks been added in the each stage, and that's kind of identifying the values, reading the values, and writing them into the pipeline. So it's mainly for runtime values that's been used in multiple places in the pipeline. So that is one thing is kind of a requirement for us, like to transform them into a AML based pipeline format. So there we have some challenges, like hard coded values needs to be parameterized, and that is not kind of a difficulty task, but it's kind of a challenging task to avoid all these values, which is kind of a standard process, and that was kind of a habit to the client. So changing that to the AML and make that available with the parameterized values, those are available in the variable, and also the secrets are also expected to available in the key vaults, which supposed to be called from the variable groups instead of calling them with a PowerShell script on the runtime. Yeah. So these are all like some of the challenges that we have in the recent project. And previously, as part of the migration, like I have involved in some couple of migrations where it lead to some issues like Docker image migrations. We have some issues with the Docker image tag informations, and properties informations are missing, because like we opted some kind of a reflecting mechanism instead of lift and shift. So there we have some issues with the properties which were not updated to the Docker images. So later, because of the property missing, the Docker files that we are running, so are not able to pick the Docker image that we actually targeting on. So these are all things are there. So these are all little difficult things that I had in my career. Have you worked with VMS, and which is better to use, VMSS with the auto scaling or VMSS? Yeah. So as I mentioned, like in the ADO case, like we have used VMSS as agent pools, so self-hosted agent pools for some of the projects. So I feel like it's totally depends on the requirement. So when you go with a VM with the auto scaling, yeah, that works if it is kind of allowed with certain threshold limits and all. And also the cost is the main consideration when we for the client. But when we opted VMSS, so obviously it's going to be costly when compared virtual machines, but it is having a high performance and reliability for our use cases. Have you ever involved in migration? And if it is yes, what kind of migration that is? Yes, I have involved migration in a couple of projects, I can say. So one is like tool stack migration. So we have set of tools which are being on the on-premises. Those tools needs to be created or needs to be migrated to the cloud. So we spinned up entire infrastructure that compatible to those DevOps tool stack, and the creation of the tools and migrating the data from on-premises to cloud. And especially on the JFrog Artifactory and ADO services. So I have lead the migration of JFrog Artifactory from on-premises to uh, Azure Cloud Infra, and also the ADO from ADO server to ADO service. Do you have experience in multi-cloud management? Yes, I have experience in multi-cloud management. It means like not at a time working with the two clouds, but in my one of the project I was involved in Synapse solution for the Azure Cloud Infra from for one of the for one of the automobile client. So where I have given a report on the infra cloud infra system, so that including of different services and its cost and its optimizations, cost optimizations, and the performance management, and the utilization of that in the cloud. So that kind of a standard. So I more in looking, I was just looking into the infra and analyzing the report on how the resources being used, and how effective they're being used, and what is the cost being charged for those resources, and what is the cost optimization solutions that we can implement for that. And there also have a plan comparison with the AWS one. So if we move to AWS, how this particular cost can be negotiated in the AWS with, is there any kind of additional benefits that we can get in the AWS, and what are all the things are they actually missing on the existing infra. So for example, there is a one scenario of like they have on-premises environment already, so on-premises servers are there, and there are multiple VMs has been spinned up in the Azure cloud. So there are uh, uh, multiple licenses, those are not being utilized, those are not being migrated from on-premise to Azure. It means like they have the licenses, those were being used in the on-premises. Now after migrating to Azure, so they can apply those licenses which they can uh, take forward, so they can bring those licenses to the cloud. So that is one kind of a benefit that Azure is offering, but the client was not implemented that. So there are multiple licenses which are not being used. Additionally, they are paying the additional cost for the licensing. So this is one place they can reduce the cost. That is one thing. And similarly, like VM scale set is kind of a service like they have used for 40 instances, but effectively there are only 4 to 5 servers are being used all the time. But rest of the servers are not kind of on demand. They all the time they wants to keep the VM scale set with the 40 instances. So we have analyzed the data and the performance and optimization. Sorry, the application insights that added to that particular service. So we have seen that. So when we realize like the performance is not up to the mark, so we have recommended them to reduce the VM count to certain level and add them with a kind of a threshold limits for the I mean, if they have a really need of increment in the resource in the VM resource counts. Do you have any questions for me before closing the call? Yeah, so here I have asked one question, like as he mentioned, like there is a multi-cloud management. So I just really want to understand, is this a kind of a requirement where we have is multi-cloud platforms involved? If yes, so what kind of what are the clouds being used? And what is the current status of this cloud management? So are we fully using the one Azure, are we fully using the AWS, or it is kind of a mix, and how it is currently running, and what is the route plan for this in the coming days once we are getting to the project. So this is one question I have asked them. This is how it went for me. And initially they scheduled for 30 minutes and it got extended to 40 minutes. I covered the questions that I have faced during all my 3 rounds. So some of the questions were like common in 3 rounds. One round is kind of a managerial round, so where he most of the time like he asked me the questions like how you can deal the scenario, how you can face these situations and all. But in 2 rounds, it's totally on the technical side, which I place all those questions in this video. If you like this video, do subscribe the channel and share the video and support me. If you have any questions related to the DevOps and cloud stack, so please do comment the video. So I will try to take up them and will come up with the best possible solutions for you. Thank you. Bye bye.